If she doesn't respect you, she'll never desire you. She might laugh at your jokes. She might text you back. She might even sleep with you. But if she doesn't feel something solid behind your eyes, she'll never stay. This is why some men give everything and still get left. You give love, attention, gifts, and still get ghosted. You're doing what you think is right, but deep down something is off. And that's exactly what this video is going to fix. Permanently. Comment, "I'm unshakable," if you're ready to become the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Number 1. You're unbothered by her moods. You live in a world that punishes stillness and rewards reaction, especially when it comes to how you respond to the unpredictable, often erratic emotional swings of someone who's never been taught to regulate herself or take ownership of her own behavior. And if you're honest, you've been trapped in the same cycle more than once. She says she needs space, you panic and chase. She pulls back emotionally, you over-explain and apologize. She goes cold, you heat up to win her back. She throws emotional tantrums and you engage, thinking your love will calm her down, but it never does. Because you're not dealing with logic, you're dealing with constant emotional tests that aren't designed to be passed, but to see if you'll betray yourself to get her approval. And every time you react, explain, or compromise your frame, you trade away a piece of your dignity. And the worst part is you know it. You lie awake after arguments feeling smaller, wondering what you did wrong, scrolling through old texts for clues. You see her treating you colder than she treated the guy who gave her half the effort you're giving her, and you keep telling yourself it's a phase, or maybe she's tired, or maybe she just needs to feel secure. But deep down, you feel it eating away at your self-worth, because you're moving like a man who needs her to feel okay himself. And the truth is, until you stop doing that, you'll always be controlled by her reactions, not your own vision. And the problem isn't just her, it's that you've built your sense of peace on someone whose emotions are built on shifting sand. And the only way you take your life back is by becoming a man who doesn't move based on moods but based on principles. You learn to become the anchor, not the sail, the rock, not the reed. And this doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means no longer adjusting your behavior every time she has a bad day. It means when she withdraws affection to test your reaction. You don't chase or overgive. You lean back into your mission. When she throws attitude or sarcasm to bait you, you don't engage. You calmly disengage, not to punish her, but because your peace is non-negotiable. And slowly she begins to shift. Not because you changed her, but because she realized she can't move you. And that realization either draws her deeper or reveals who she truly is. And either way, you win. Because your self-respect is no longer dependent on how she feels that day. It's anchored in who you've become. A man whose emotions are privately processed and never performative. A man who breathes before reacting, observes before speaking, pauses before committing. And when she sees that you won't rise to every bait, that you won't fix what's hers to fix, that you won't panic to preserve the vibe, that you are still grounded whether she's affectionate or dismissive, that her moods don't dictate your mission, your schedule, your self-esteem. She either submits to the peace you've built or she self-destructs trying to shake it, and either outcome frees you, because now you are finally choosing your mental health over temporary connection, your standards over her signals, your purpose over her patterns. And this quiet but powerful transformation starts when you stop internalizing her confusion and realize that emotional discipline is not about suppressing feelings, but mastering response. And now, instead of explaining yourself, you let your actions speak. Instead of seeking harmony, you uphold alignment. Instead of managing her emotions, you manage your focus. And if she comes with calm, she's welcome. But if she comes with chaos, you don't entertain it. Not because you're hard or heartless, but because you've finally learned that entertaining dysfunction is not loyalty, it's weakness. And in your stillness, you gain back everything you lost in your reactions. You reclaim your time, your energy, your direction, and most of all, your respect. Because women don't test to hurt. They test to feel safety. And when you finally stop bending to pass the test, you pass it effortlessly, not by being perfect, but by being unmoved. And now you walk different, talk different. Not because you're pretending to be someone you're not, but because you've let go of needing to be liked, needing to be validated, needing to be understood. And in that letting go, you become undeniable, because when you're no longer moved by her mood, she's either forced to rise to your level or lose access to your presence. And both options are a win for you, because when you stop making her moods your compass and start living from principle, you gain a level of peace most men will never taste. And to help you live from that place of clarity every single day, I've put together the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, a complete, powerful guide filled with the timeless Stoic principles that flipped my own life from emotionally reactive to deeply grounded. And it's not just a book, it's now available in audiobook form, so you can walk, train, drive, jog, and still absorb every insight that redefines what it means to lead, love, and live as a grounded man. And when you get it today, it's yours forever. No limitations, just a lifetime of access to the exact mindset that separates the man who begs to be chosen from the man who's already chosen his path. And if you've ever asked yourself, why do I lose her respect when I give so much? Or, why do I feel lost without her? This book will answer that, with the kind of truths that rewire your entire emotional reality. So check the link in the comments, claim what's already yours, and make the choice most never will, to lead your relationships, not react to them. Number 2, you don't explain yourself too much. You've spent years trying to be understood, and it's been slowly draining you of your strength, your energy, your dignity, because every time you explain yourself to someone who's already decided not to listen, you're handing them a weapon to use against your peace. And what you don't see in the moment is that this habit of over-explaining doesn't come from logic. It comes from fear. Fear that if they don't understand you, they'll leave. Fear that if you don't make your intentions clear, you'll be misjudged. And that fear has turned you into a man who argues for his own worth, who defends decisions that don't need defending, who lays out his truth like an open book hoping someone else will find value in it before he does. And the hard truth is, the more you explain, the more you look like you're asking for permission, because when you justify your boundaries, your standards, your choices, what you're really saying is, I'm not sure if I deserve to hold this line unless you approve. And that's not strength. It's weakness wrapped in politeness. And women see it instantly. They feel the hesitation. They feel the overthinking. They feel the underlying anxiety that says, please don't get upset with me. And it kills their respect without a word, because no one respects someone who needs to be understood more than they need to be rooted. And if you're the man who constantly feels the urge to clarify, to soften, to make sure she doesn't misunderstand your silence, your withdrawal, your decision, then what you're really saying is, your perception of me matters more than my peace. And it shows, not just in how you speak, but in how you move, in how you hesitate, in how you follow up texts with just making sure you saw this, in how you backtrack after saying something true, in how you walk on eggshells hoping to keep the vibe. And the solution is not to be colder, not to be cruel, but to be decisive, to start trusting your inner compass more than her reaction to it, to speak once and live like you meant it, to drop the need for verbal validation and let your actions speak the sentence you no longer explain. And when she questions you with, "Why didn't you reply faster?" or "Why are you acting distant?" you don't break into an emotional TED talk about your day or your feelings or your rationale. You keep it short, calm, clean, because now you've learned that clarity doesn't need a monologue. It needs alignment. And the more you try to explain what's obvious, the more unclear you look. So instead of trying to make her feel comfortable, you start focusing on being consistent. And when she pushes back, when she accuses, when she mocks, when she tries to twist your silence into guilt, you stay silent, not to win, but because you've already said all you needed by how you live. And this shift doesn't just make her rethink, it makes her submit emotionally, because there is something deeply magnetic about a man who doesn't argue, who doesn't plead, who doesn't need to rehearse sentences for someone who doesn't value his peace. And you begin to notice it in how she reacts to your stillness. She becomes careful with her words, more measured in her tone, because suddenly she doesn't have access to your emotional energy for free anymore. And it creates a vacuum, a space where she starts adjusting, not because you demanded it, but because you detached from the need to justify your value. And now the very same woman who used to drain you with arguments is tiptoeing around your clarity, not because you're controlling her, but because she knows you're no longer available for conversations that compromise your dignity. And you finally become the man who doesn't over-explain, not because he has something to hide, but because he no longer needs to be seen to know who he is. And every decision you make from this new place of internal certainty adds to your presence. When you say no, it lands without explanation. When you pull back, it feels intentional. When you disagree, it's firm but quiet. And she feels it, not just hears it. And now you realize that the man who speaks less but lives more always commands more respect than the one who tries to explain his way into being loved. So you stop explaining, you start embodying, and suddenly your words carry more weight, not because they're louder or longer, but because they're rare. And when she finally understands that your silence is not confusion, not apathy, but clarity, that's when the shift happens, not in her, but in you, because now you're free from the addiction of being understood, and that's when you become untouchable. Number 3, say no without fear. There's a reason you hesitate when the moment calls for a direct no. You've been trained to believe that rejection equals cruelty, that denying a request makes you less caring, less worthy of love, less of a partner. But in that programming, you lost the one thing that holds your value in place, your backbone, because every time you say yes when you mean no, you lie to yourself, and even worse, you let her see you lie, and she watches it. Not just the words you speak, but the energy behind them, the guilt in your tone, the conflict in your eyes, the way you try to soften your truth just to maintain a temporary connection. And it's in those moments that her respect dies slowly, quietly, invisibly, and you don't see it until it's too late, until she's emotionally cold, physically distant, and mentally absent, and you're sitting there wondering how you ended up in another one-sided dynamic where your needs are optional and her preferences are law. And the answer is simple. Your fear of being disliked has turned you into a man who trades self-respect for temporary peace, and that peace never lasts, because when you compromise yourself to avoid rejection, you only invite deeper rejection in the future. Not for who you are, but for who you become in her eyes. A man whose boundaries collapse the moment they're tested, and you've done this more than once. You've said yes to things that drained your energy, gave time when you were exhausted, gave forgiveness before she earned it, said okay when everything inside you screamed no, and all because you thought being agreeable would earn you love. But what it earned you was resentment, hers and yours. And the only way out of this pattern is to start saying no from a place of peace, without anger, without apology, without long explanations. Just clear refusal that comes from knowing what you stand for, and the shift starts in the small things, like when she asks you to change plans last minute and you politely decline, or when she tries to bait you into an argument and you walk away without a word, or when she tests your boundaries by pretending not to understand them. And instead of debating, you hold the line without emotion, because you finally realize that saying no isn't confrontation, it's calibration. It's how you teach the world, including her, how to treat you. And once you get good at it, something interesting happens. She starts respecting your time more, starts asking instead of assuming, starts checking her tone before raising her voice. Not because you told her to, but because your no has weight now. Your no has consequences. Your no is not an invitation to negotiate. And this is when you stop being seen as an option and start being seen as a standard. Because people only test boundaries they believe are flexible. And the moment she sees yours aren't, she either adjusts or exits, both of which give you clarity. And you need that clarity because too many men are stuck in relationships where they're exhausted by the emotional demands of someone who never learns to respect their no. Not because she's cruel, but because you trained her that your no can be debated, softened, reversed, and now you stop doing that. You say no to anything that doesn't align with your priorities, your peace, your growth. And you say it without raised voice or bitterness, because real power doesn't need to yell, it just exits. And the beauty of this shift is that it frees you to say yes with integrity, not out of pressure, but out of truth. Because when your no is clean, your yes becomes sacred, and now she feels the difference. She knows when you say yes, you mean it, and that yes carries more weight than 100 spineless affirmations. And this new version of you doesn't lose people. You filter them. You don't chase validation. You own your direction. And from that space, you build relationships rooted in mutual respect, not silent resentment. And it all begins the day you stop fearing rejection and start honoring your own alignment. Because the truth is, you don't owe anyone access to your energy just because they ask for it. And the sooner you live that, the sooner you become untouchable. Not because you're cold, but because you've mastered the courage to say no, not as a reaction, but as a standard. Number 4, don't try to impress her. The moment you start trying to impress her is the moment you lose yourself. Because whether you realize it or not, that effort to showcase, to exaggerate, to perform, is rooted in the belief that who you are right now isn't enough. And the moment you adopt that belief, you subconsciously communicate it to her, not through your words, but through your tone, your body language, your energy. And she can feel it every time you laugh a little too hard at her jokes. Every time you bring up your job title when no one asked. Every time you subtly talk about your future plans, just to look ambitious. Every time you dress, not to reflect your values, but to match the aesthetic you think she'll like. Every time you try to match her interests, when deep down you couldn't care less about that podcast or show she's obsessed with. And what you don't see is that every single one of those efforts doesn't make her lean in. It pushes her further away because you become easy to read, predictable, easy to sway, and that makes you forgettable. And the tragedy is that you're not doing it to be fake. You're doing it because no one ever told you that the man who stands still, who doesn't need to perform, who lets the world see him as he is and doesn't shrink or inflate, that man is the one who commands true attention, not because he tries, but because he doesn't have to. And if you're being honest, you've been caught in this loop more than once, trying to upgrade yourself not for your own growth, but for her validation, hoping that if you show her the best version of you, she'll choose you. And in doing so, you stop living for yourself and start managing your image like a PR campaign, always calculating how you're being seen, always watching her face for a reaction, always adjusting who you are based on who you think she wants. And that's not confidence, that's insecurity dressed up as effort. And it's exhausting, it's humiliating, it's draining. And you never walk away from those interactions feeling respected. You walk away feeling small, like you performed well but still weren't picked. And the worst part is, you think the solution is to try harder, to impress more, to say something cooler next time. But the truth is, the solution is to stop entirely, to stop building your self-image around her attention and start building your reality around your own mission, your own preferences, your own life. because the man who no longer needs to be liked becomes magnetic, and that shift doesn't require you to be arrogant or dismissive. It requires you to return to yourself, to choose your own taste in music and actually play it when she's around, to wear what feels right to you even if it doesn't fit the trend, to speak directly without filtering every sentence through a "will this sound cool" filter, to stand on your truth without needing applause. And that energy, that quiet, unshakable presence, is what she feels in her gut, because now you're no longer there to win her over. You're there to live your life, and she can choose to come along or not. And that's when things flip, not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped selling it. And now she leans in, she asks more, she observes you differently, and if she doesn't, it doesn't faze you, because you no longer build your value on her response. You build it on your reality, on your routine, on your standards, on how you show up when no one's watching. And this is where men go wrong. They spend all their energy trying to be impressive externally while their internal world is neglected, unstructured, directionless. And if you really want to be the man that people remember, that women align with, that peers respect, you need to stop performing and start producing. Produce results in your life, in your business, in your discipline, and let that do the talking. Because when your actions start aligning with your identity, and your identity stops being dependent on external approval, you become undeniable. And at that point, the right woman will be impressed not by what you say, but by how little you need to say, not by how much you show, but by how much you've already built, not by how perfectly you perform, but by how powerfully you show up without performance. And from that point on, you're no longer chasing attraction, you're leading it. Number 5, focus on your mission. You spend your time wondering why she's pulling back, why the texts are shorter, why the vibe feels colder, why she seems emotionally unavailable while still physically present, why the fire that once felt real now flickers without reason. And you blame yourself, thinking maybe you didn't say the right thing. Maybe you were too emotional, maybe too cold, maybe you showed too much interest or too little, and you spiral, adjusting every behavior like you're solving a puzzle that keeps changing shape. But what you never ask is whether you're building anything that actually gives your life meaning beyond her attention. Because the real problem isn't how she treats you, it's how little direction you have without her gaze guiding your actions. And this is the trap so many men fall into. They make her the mission. They put all their purpose into being chosen, desired, validated, accepted. And once she senses that she has become the center of your ambition, she begins to emotionally drift, not because she's ungrateful or cruel, but because she was never meant to be your purpose. She was meant to witness it. And when there's nothing for her to witness but her own reflection in your eyes, the attraction dies quietly, and suddenly you're no longer the man who had momentum. You're the man who waits for replies, and that's why your mission is everything. Because without it, you become reactive, fragile, unsure of yourself, addicted to signals from someone who isn't even sure what she wants. And you wake up checking your phone instead of checking your vision, hoping for a message instead of mapping your moves. And the longer you stay in this space, the more you shrink, the more you lose your voice, your edge, your hunger, and what used to make you magnetic becomes dull and aimless. So the solution is simple, brutal, and liberating. You build your life in such a way that her presence adds to it, but her absence doesn't subtract from it. And that starts with defining exactly what the next version of you looks like. What skills are you mastering? What habits are you embedding? What empire are you quietly constructing in the hours when no one is watching? Because when you're locked into a goal that stretches you, humbles you, demands your discipline and focus, you no longer overanalyze her mood swings because your time is now accounted for, and she feels it, not just in how you act, but in how you carry yourself. Because now when she pulls back, you don't panic, You pull inward and push forward. You write, you train, you build, and you create momentum that has nothing to do with her energy and everything to do with who you're becoming. And this makes you emotionally unavailable in the best possible way. Not because you're closed off, but because you're open to something bigger than approval. And now when you speak, it's brief and purposeful. When you connect, it's authentic but not clingy. When you commit, it's from strength, not lack. And she either meets you there or fades into the background. Not because you're punishing her, but because your focus no longer wavers based on someone else's inconsistency. And this is when things flip, not because you chase less, but because you've become so committed to your own path that anything not aligned simply fades without resistance. And now you stop thinking about how to get her attention and start thinking about how to become the kind of man whose life attracts depth, value, and alignment without chasing. And the beauty of this is that your mission starts to feed every other area of your life. It sharpens your speech, refines your presence, hardens your resilience, deepens your patience, and clarifies your standards. And now your no is cleaner. Your time is more expensive. Your boundaries are tighter, not because you're guarding wounds, but because you're guarding progress, and people notice it. Not because you say more, but because you say less and do more. And she begins to orbit you, not because you manipulated her, but because your gravity increased. And the version of you who used to wait for messages now leaves messages unread without guilt because you're building something. And that building isn't just about wealth or status. It's about structure, about becoming someone who lives by rhythm, routine, and results. And you become dangerous not through aggression, but through direction. And now women don't just desire you, they respect you, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. And the silence that used to scare you now feels like peace, because you've tasted the freedom of being untethered from her emotional GPS, and you've replaced it with your own internal compass. And when she comes back, curious, cautious, recalibrated, you don't reject her. You simply don't change course for her, because your mission comes first, always. And any connection that asks you to pause that journey is no longer seen as love. It's seen as distraction, and that mindset is the threshold into a new level of living, where you don't wake up seeking attention, but executing intention. And everything in your life bends to that one simple truth. If she adds, she's welcome. If she subtracts, she's released, because the mission is not optional. It's who you are now. They never wanted you to find this out, because a man who no longer chases, who no longer reacts, who no longer bows to emotional chaos, becomes impossible to control. And that's exactly who you're becoming. If you're ready to let go of the lies, the overgiving, the self-betrayal, and finally reclaim your power, your time, your peace, then the Stoic relationship blueprint is your next move. It's filled with timeless truths that most men will never hear because society profits off your confusion. But now, it's all yours, forever, and now available in audiobook form so you can soak in this life-changing wisdom while you walk, train, or breathe. No excuses. Hit the link in the comments, like this video, subscribe to help another man wake up before he loses everything. And if you're ready to live from clarity, not chaos, comment, "I am the prize."